Futsi, AU Ambassador to the United States of America. Round of applause. Second, Dr. Joseph Sani, Vice President of the United States Institute of Peace. Sani. Mr. Tom Sheehy, also the U.S. Institute of Peace, but for this conversation, former staff director of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, understanding the legislative piece of U.S. policy. Last but not least, Denai K. Pauli, who's a senior advisor from the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment that had a big day yesterday on the world stage, and she's going to be talking about that and talking about it tomorrow as well. Okay. Round of applause. Dope. First, I want to shout out to the executive chairman of the Africa Prosperity Network, who, as we know, couldn't be here today, but whose vision we are all representing. So can we please give him well wishes and a round of applause? Thank you. So our bios are in the program, but what I want to talk about is not what differentiates us, but what puts us on this panel today. And I want to let you guys know that I wrote this introduction for you, not for you. so we can have a conversation, a real conversation about what's happening on U.S. policy. And as I think you know, my friends are from across public and private sector, also across government, across Africa, across the United States. So diverse backgrounds, but a few things we have in common. First, we are advocates for Africa, helping to prioritize the importance of the continent for the U.S. national security and U.S. economic interests. Second, we are operatives in the can-do sense of the word. And then in the word of a friend of mine who shall not be named on this panel, sometimes we call ourselves co-conspirators. Collectively and individually, we try to find the policy intersection between U.S. and African interests and develop a programmatic pathway using the tools that the U.S. government has at its disposal. This includes our trade and development finance agencies, our foreign assistance, our U.S. participation in multilateral agencies, along with U.S. diplomatic capacity, and to my friend here, our convening power. So, and the key is that we must all do this within the context of the realities of Washington, D.C., no matter who controls Congress, no matter who controls the White House. We're having this conversation just 40 days ahead of our presidential and national elections, where polls have everything in a dead heat, and during a campaign cycle which has seen the most unprecedented disruption in our country's recent history, from the withdrawal of the race of President Joe Biden, the selection of Vice President Kamala Harris. You can applaud if you want. And the unfortunate security lapse of 2 assassination attempts on the life of former President Donald Trump. All of this has disrupted the electorate, and nobody here and nobody in this room knows how it's going to go. Our panel here, we're not about picking sides. We are apolitical, right? Mm-hmm. We are apolitical. Our responsibility is to make U.S.-Africa policy future-proof. And that means building on the bipartisan consensus in place. So what I'm going to do is talk about the main parts of bipartisan consensus, and then I'm going to turn it over to each panelist and let them explain to you what that means. On the bipartisan consensus, we have the renewal of the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. That is a big bipartisan consensus, the need for trade, the need to connect with the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. Whether that happens this year, don't know. Whether it expands, who's in it, who's out, all of that up for grabs. The other is the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment. This is a strategic partnership with the G7 that looks at how to build a corridor across the continent, the infrastructure, the way to be able to beneficiate, build jobs, and compete. We're going to talk about that. The Mineral Security Partnership, another consensus piece. U.S. Development Finance Corporation, our critical partner, and it goes on and on. So now I'm going to turn it over to our panelists. You ready? We have 3 minutes, and I think it's possible that VIPs might walk in, so we have to be succinct. Ambassador, I want to turn it over to you to talk about where are we on the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, what you hope to see, and what the people in this room can do to support. Over.
Thank you very much for this question. And let me first by thank the PA. Oh my goodness. Let me thank Africa Prosperity Network and the Africa America Institute for convening such an important forum on the sidelines of hunger. And the selected theme that is very important and which is very timely, mobilizing global African investments for Africa infrastructural needs. Thank you for directing the question around the AGOA, African Growth and Opportunity Act. We are at that stage whereby, as African Union and the member states, we are pushing for this AGOA to be renewed. We have countries at the moment that have adopted this AGOA and who are developing around issues to do with the trade investment. As you know, on the continent at the moment, we have a lot of innovation. And for the Growth and Opportunity Act, it has given us an opportunity for a market for our people, for the people who are coming from Africa, who are developing, who are pushing their goods through that innovation. And then what it means is we really are pushing for the AGOA to be renewed for 16 years. 16 years, at least 16 years. And if it can happen by the 2025 when it expires, if it can happen along this time around, we have been discussing with friends. We have been discussing with those who are concerned about the issue to do with AGOA. And we found that around the lame duck session, maybe things may happen.
Thank you, Ambassador. So for those of you in the room, the lame duck session happens on November 6th after our election, when everybody, the Congress can do what it wants in some ways without consequence because a new Congress comes in at the end of the year. So people like us who are advocates and operatives, we look at ways to move things in the lame duck session. As the ambassador rightly pointed out, the ambassador has been leading the advocacy effort for African ambassadors to ensure that this is a priority. So we're going to turn it over really quick to Denai. And Denai is going to talk about the Partnership for Global Infrastructure. And just to give you a sense, there was a historic announcement made yesterday with respect to the Libido Corridor, not just the Libido Corridor that goes through Angola, but the vision of moving it and lifting up the Copper Belt and eventually going all the way east. And so Denai is going to talk about what her team was able to accomplish. And we also have a few participants in the audience who were part of that announcement. Denai, over to you. I forgot the ground rules. Thank you for following. It's 3 minutes. And I have a stopwatch. Over.
Great. So yes, yesterday was indeed a big day, but let me take a step back and just an overview of what PGI is. The Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment is a G7 initiative launched in 2022, focused on mobilizing $600 billion for infrastructure in emerging markets, of which the U.S. committed to mobilizing $200 billion by 2027. And we started off on the continent. Our approach is to focus especially on strategic economic corridors, where we can layer infrastructure investments in transportation and logistics, in clean energy, in digital access, in health, in agribusiness, all together. And by layering these investments on top of each other, have a more catalytic impact on the economic growth of the partners that we're working with on the continent. And our first flagship corridor, as Reba mentioned, is the Lobito Corridor, starting in Angola, but connecting to the DRC, working closely with the Africa Finance Corporation on building a greenfield rail across Zambia, with the vision ultimately to connect the continent from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean. Yesterday, we marked a important milestone, specifically for the Greenfield Rail project that has brought together originally 7 partners, including the EU, the African Development Bank, and AFC. But we recently have added Italy with a $320 million contribution to the rail, And yesterday we had an important conversation with Secretary Blinken, where we also invited Tanzania to the conversation to really understand the opportunities to extend this economic corridor beyond just Angola, DRC, and Zambia. We're also very excited with the historic announcement that Riva mentioned is the president's trip to Angola, which will happen in October. This will be the first visit of an American head of state to Angola, and an opportunity to really elevate the conversation about the Libido corridor, not just in Angola, but really the vision for connecting the continent and how we can mobilize a coalition of partners to make it a reality.
Thank you, Denai. And Gabby, if we could have made that announcement on your stage, if you're listening, we would have done so. And shout out to our colleague from Africa Finance Corporation, if you could please stand up, Mohammed, and just wave. And they are the project developers on the Greenfield Rail. So thank you so much. Sonny, you go last. Tom. Tom is a distinguished fellow at the U.S. Institute of Peace, and he recently authored a paper about critical minerals. What should the U.S. be thinking? How should the U.S. engage Africa onto this theme on what Africa wants? And so Tom is going to talk to the key takeaways from the project, and then we'll go back. And then I just want to say that the last round of the questions is going to be to see how we future-proof all of these projects going into a new Congress and administration. And bipartisan consensus, most of them don't have legislative backbone. They're just presidential initiatives. Tom, over to you.
Thank you, Riva. Thank you, Riva. And yes, we had a report, U.S. Institute of Peace had a report on critical minerals in Africa. And obviously, we know there's a lot of attention focused on critical minerals, the infrastructure that's needed to access the critical minerals. And there's just, I think it's important to realize that the U.S. is fairly late to the game here. Traditionally, we haven't developed infrastructure. We haven't been doing the types of good work that Denai is working on. And we haven't been focused on critical minerals. And that's for a variety of reasons. Traditionally, we haven't had U.S. mining companies active on the continent. All of a sudden, we have a strong interest in critical minerals. So what are we going to do about it? I think it's important to realize and just keep in mind in all these conversations, and it came up today, this has to be private sector driven. And so the U.S. government, through things like Development Finance Corporation, PGI, these great initiatives, Mineral Security Partnership, where we're working with our allies, that's all very helpful and in many instances necessary, but it's not going to guarantee success. Ultimately, the private sector is going to have to engage. They need this kind of support, but those decisions are largely going to be market decisions, and they're going to be dictated by things, the price of commodities, the investment climate. And so while we're talking a lot about what the U.S. is doing, I think it's very important. This is two sides of a coin. African governments have to work as well to provide the supportive environment that's going to encourage U.S. companies. And I mentioned there haven't been, it's more acute with mining, but we're fighting to get all U.S. companies involved across the board in different sectors and overcome that risk perception that we've discussed. These have to be partnerships, and Africans have their side to play in terms of better rule of law and other aspects that are going to make their countries more attractive to investment. And so we have a series of recommendations, and again, the U.S. government has to do much more to have a coherent strategy focused on helping. And finally, these have to be mutually beneficial. They're African resources, they're not U.S. resources, they're not Western resources. We want to partner with African governments to develop resources in a mutually beneficial way that address our interests in our critical minerals needs, our energy transition needs, but most importantly, work to Africans' development needs.
Thanks, Tom. And again, Tom's relevance, not only critical minerals, but as we all know, as Denai knows, as the ambassador knows, any initiative presidential has to be capacitized in Congress, has to have bipartisan support. in all of the projects that go through our Development Finance Corporation, USTDA, EXIM, have to have no objection 30 days from the Congress. So that's why it's so important to have a conversation that includes and makes things future-proof. Sonny, we're going to turn it over to you. They said we have 10 minutes, but I'm going to try to be a little bit longer. But anyway, Sonny is going to talk about the intersection between peace and conflict and economic development and the programs that he's working on at the USIP to deal with the countries that need to stabilize from a security and governance perspective to benefit from private sector participation. And there are two things I wanted Sonny to talk about in the 2 minutes you have. Sorry, Sonny. One is the Global Fragility Act to prevent conflict and promote stability. But the other is your initiative, and particularly for our friends in this room, which is to support the democratic coastal states of West Africa, which provide a buffer to the Sahel, which is completely coup-based now. Sonny, 2 minutes.
That's a tough challenge. I think, first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for just for the flow of the conversation. I was very inspired to see African businesses on the podium talking about what they are doing for the continent. I think that sets the tone of the consensus we are talking about. I don't approach too much because I have 2 minutes. Yeah, for the consensus, I think it means we are charting our own story. And I think it's important because this is the shift we are also seeing in the US-Africa policy. Africans have to lead the way, and the United States will support. African countries invest more in their own development than foreign aid. So I think that's a narrative we have to break. It's true. Africans are the ones investing on their own development. So whatever comes from the United States is an add-on. But let me focus more on the initiative you mentioned, the strategy for preventing conflict and promoting stability. Why? It's important because stability, peace is crucial for any kind of development. Again, here, to speak from a business perspective, I think this strategy is relevant because it helps reduce the political risk of instability. Right? It's a bipartisan act from Congress, the Global Fragility Act, where the US government for the first time decided to invest on particularly promoting stability. It's about $100 million in coastal West Africa. The originality or the innovative factor of this act is that we are investing long-term. It promotes local ownership. So it's some form of compact between the receiving countries and the US government, identifying joint priorities where the money will go. It's also important in the sense that it encourages burden sharing, so partnerships. So in fact, the money is a catalytic investment on stability. So that's the original 3 points: partnerships, local ownership, and long-term planning. It allows African countries to plan long-term. For the moment, we can discuss in the second round, but I think one of the soft bellies of our US instruments sometimes tend to be unpredictability because we combine them to some sanction regimes. Sometimes AGOA may not be funded or will be withdrawn because the country experience a coup d'etat or adverse consequences. But the Global Fragility Act injects this level of predictability. It's a 10 years engagement. So that allows countries to plan long term. I will stop there for now.
I think we have 2 minutes. So I'm going to give everybody 30 seconds for the last word, just in terms of what we need to do in this room. We have these programs with the Mineral Security Partnership for Global Infrastructure Investment, the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. We're trying to build more support for the Development Finance Corporation so that it is flexibility, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, all of these issues. What can we do? What can we do in this room to make sure that the U.S. builds a policy of what Africa wants, but more on our side, again, going back where operatives trying to manage this, is how we build support in Washington, Republican and Democrat, to demonstrate that what Africa needs and the support is in our fundamental national economic security interest. And that's the space we all have to work in. So I want to turn it over to Ambassador for just brief closing remarks, and thank you for anchoring this panel. And then we'll turn it out and we'll roll and over.
No, thank you very much. And let me just say, at the moment, as we are pushing for AGOA renewal, it is an advantage to us. It's mutually beneficial, as he is talking about it, one of the panelists here. And we are looking at leveraging the AFCFTA. The good thing, Africa at the moment has its policy frameworks. And if we leverage what AFCFTA is looking at, the intra-Africa trade, where we trade amongst ourselves, and also the beneficiation that we're talking about and the industrialization that we would want to reach. And thank God we have our people who are already working on pushing and making sure that we get into that industrialization and that we are doing the beneficiation that we want. And as this leverage comes into place through AFCFTA and AGOA, which is getting so much support, bipartisan support, we are saying, let's move and domesticate this AGOA. Let's do the best capacity building to ensure our people build on more in the goods that they make, and the market is ready.
Thank you so much.
Is open for the market.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I'm going to go specific questions. Denai, do you think there's the capacity to legislate, to build legislative support for the Partnership for Global Initiative? Every initiative that we've had, whether it's the issue of PEPFAR, whether it's the issue of the Development Finance Corporation, Electrifying Africa, everything that's sustainable has had companion legislation. So in 30 seconds, what's the pathway? Denai, you can do anything.
I mean, I won't speak for Congress because I'm not an elected official, but I do think to a certain degree, the way that PGI is structured in partnership with private sector is a key way to future-proof it, as you call it, and specifically with AFC as a lead project developer and the concessions that were signed yesterday really help insulate at least some of the major infrastructure that unlocks the other investments against any shifts in politics. That said, I also think a key way to endure the future is by being a proof point. If we are able to demonstrate that the U.S. can bring together partners to formulate creative solutions that are private sector driven to infrastructure challenges on the continent and around the world, that is the proof point that will lead the pathway to legislation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Sani, before I'm gonna go to you. I'm gonna give you a tough one, right? So we've focused a lot on some of these countries in the Sahel and elsewhere that have had military coups, and we have robust initiatives to help move them back in the other direction. But what about the robust initiatives for coastal West Africa? Are we doing enough to support the democracies on coastal West Africa? You two aren't official and can't say much, but I'd love for you to share the recommendations of your paper, maybe the top 3 recommendations.
Yeah, I think it's important to calibrate our engagement with coastal West Africa. So there are countries that are already able, they have demonstrated an absorptive capacity. So the democracy like the Ghana, the Senegal, the Nigeria, where we have to provide the full bond of our foreign engagement, diplomacy, defense, and investment. For the Sahel, we have to recalibrate and recognize that these countries are not yet there. It doesn't mean we should stop engaging with them, but we engage recognizing the limitation of their institutions. Overall, I say for people in this room, I think keep on pushing the positive narrative. I think overall, everyone wants to invest in a champion. If we demonstrate that we are champions, we are writing our own story, we emulate and encourage people to join us. So for me, that would be my ask for the people in this world who are doing great things. We have to be our own champions. Nobody will be African champions. Africans have to be their own champions.
Okay, absolutely. Tom, tough one for you, right? So we are investing in critical minerals. We have the Mineral Security Partnership. Are the challenges with China and Russia and other actors, are those going to need to continue to drive our ability to get support for these projects, or will these projects stand alone because they benefit Africans and benefit the U.S.? Over.
A little of both, Riva. I think depending on the constituency, some folks politically are motivated by certain things. Without a doubt, competing with China is a major driver of U.S. policy towards Africa. There's nothing wrong with that. But what we emphasize in our paper, again, it has to be good for Africans. We're quite aware Africans don't like to be put into this context of geopolitical competition. We invest because it's good for the U.S., it's good for Africans. Those are the kind of mutually beneficial partnerships we want, but there's always that reality of global competition, and people are going to think in those terms. So it's something to be recognized, managed, and hopefully can be a positive and not a negative.
Honestly, you have to respond to the energy in the room. If the energy is competing with China and addressing Russia, you have to take that energy, build it into your message, make it African-owned, and push it forward. You use what you can to drive the agenda. I want to have everyone give a round of applause to my co-conspirators. And thank you very much.
Shall we have a group picture of the panel, please?
I did not figure out how to turn this off. You guys could do that the whole time, right? Yeah.
Thank you very much. May I quickly invite our video to be played? Thank you very much. We will play our video shortly and then go on to do the launch of Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025. I will invite the group CEO of UBA. I would also invite Fatima of Badea and Kofi Apenteng of AAI to join me on the stage as they perform this launch. Our video, please.
This is Africa, endowed with vast natural resources. This is Africa, home to the world's fastest growing population. This is Africa, a potential green energy force to be reckoned with, from Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam, capable of powering the entire East Africa. West Africa's gas reserves, capable of powering vast regions, to the Democratic Republic of Congo's Grand Inga Dam project, capable of powering the entire continent. This is Africa, where the discovery of large oil and gas deposits are still being made. But this is also Africa, where we export significant crude oil and import even more significant petroleum products. This is Africa, where one of the largest well-managed airlines in the world continues its growth trajectory unhindered. But this is also Africa, where a business person from Algeria has to connect outside the continent to travel to Zimbabwe. According to the World Bank, the sub-Saharan African region needs to invest a staggering 7.1% of its GDP annually in infrastructure to meet its sustainable development goals. The African Development Bank estimates that closing the continent's infrastructure gap will require a minimum of $130 billion per year, leaving a shortfall of around $100 billion. While bridging this financing chasm presents a Herculean task, change is already simmering beneath the surface as several initiatives gain ground. Because this is Africa, where infrastructure investments in transport and logistics, industry, science and technology present an immense potential for both private and institutional investors. Africa's path to prosperity rests on two pillars: substantial investments in transportation infrastructure, and the ratification of ambitious trade agreements like the African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA. This is Africa, where our shared prosperity lies in integration. Africa faces significant trade hurdles as barriers, tariffs, and restrictions on the movement of people and goods continue to slow policy efforts made by the African Union and regional economic communities to forge a unified continent capable of thriving in the global marketplace. The AfCFTA, with its potential to create the world's largest single market of over 1.4 billion people and a combined GDP of $3.4 trillion, is a game changer, complementing trade integration by reducing transportation time on roads, ports, and border posts, promises to boost exports by 11.5% and GDP by 2%. To fully harness these benefits, Africa must develop an integrated continent-wide infrastructure network. This will require increasing annual infrastructure investments from 3.5% to 4.5% of GDP, or an additional $40 billion a year. Public-private partnerships and the mobilization of domestic resources and local capital markets are pivotal for the continent's development. And because this is Africa, connectivity matters, with the continent's digital economy undergoing a seismic shift. Projections by the African Development Bank show that the digital sector will surge from $115 billion in 2023 to $712 billion by 2050. Africa's rapid adoption of mobile financial services is fueling financial inclusion and growth, highlighting the transformative potential of digital infrastructure. Africa's astounding leapfrog in mobile telephony and now mobile financial services is evidence of the continent's endless opportunities for investments that connect us. This is Africa, where challenges present immense opportunities. By investing strategically, integrating effectively, and prioritizing connectivity, Africa can unlock a new era of shared prosperity for its burgeoning population. The Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025 provide a roadmap for this transformation, a call to action for governments, the private sector, and international partners to unite behind a common vision. We welcome you to the next Africa Prosperity Dialogues, which takes place in Accra from the 30th of January to the 1st of February 2025. Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025.
Delivering Africa's single market through infrastructure. Invest, integrate, connect.
So we expect you going to officially announce the launch of Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025.
So we'll launch the Africa Prosperity Dialogue 2025.
It gives us a great honor and a pleasure to launch the Africa Prosperity Dialogue on a very interesting, challenging topic to the continent, but nothing is challenging for Africa. Africa will thrive, Africa will survive and will shine. Join us and we'll see you soon in Accra. Thank you.
Oh, everything must be said to be commenced. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, it's our pleasure to declare the Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025 duly opened.
Thank you. See you later.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for that kind gesture. Thank you very much. I'm going to invite launch Prosper Africa. And then after that, we have two other discussions. So, microphone off. All right. Okay. So please, let's welcome the group from Denvers to formally the Prosper Africa. Yes, so Prosper Africa constructed. All right. So,
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, I guess we're getting to that point already. It's been a long day for everybody and a long week. Good afternoon. Firstly, I'd like to thank the President for your remarks and for your foresight in launching the Global Africa Network along with Africa Exim Bank and UNDP. And to thank all of you at AAI and APN for the invitation to speak here this evening at the Global Africa Forum. I'm British Robinson, the coordinator of Prosper Africa. Prosper Africa is a presidential national security initiative designed to catalyze two-way trade and investment on the continent of Africa. We do that through working with our partner, 17 U.S. government agencies, to create innovative tools, products, and instruments to assist, support, and enable African economies to be full participants in the global capital markets. With that, I also would like to say that I'm honored and joined to be on stage by two very innovative partners and thinkers, Frank Aswani, the CEO of the African Venture Philanthropy Alliance, and Faustini Fin Naemi, Executive Director for Africa at the Children's Investment Foundation. Private capital is critical in closing the multi-trillion-dollar investment gap that is needed to achieve climate and sustainable development goals across the developing world, but most crucially in Africa, where we know that 35 of the 50 countries are most at risk for climate change effects are located. If just 1% of these assets were invested in Africa, we would close the investment gaps entirely, leveraging the scale and sophistication of a whole new set of actors. Those new sets of actors, many of whom are sitting on the sidelines. Foundations and philanthropists have a critical role to play in this, both as capital allocators and as catalytic capital providers. However, it's a role that's not always fully understood. So today, in partnership with the Children's Investment Fund, or CIF, Prosper Africa is pleased to announce our support of the African Venture Philanthropy Alliance, or AVPA, their efforts to mobilize Africa's domestic capital with our own support and U.S. capital for Africa's economic and social development. The fund that we're about to announce, that we are jointly announcing today, and that Frank will tell you a little bit more about in a minute, is a powerful step forward in mobilizing resources and unlocking private capital to drive sustainable development across Africa. We are honored, Frank, and our partner at AVPA, to be a part of this initiative. I think the conversation a few minutes ago talks about how Africa can fully participate in its journey and its growth. And we at Prosper Africa are honored to be a small part in helping you create those deep economies and those deep markets. And we can't think of a better way, not only through our own work, daily work, but supporting you in this very innovative, very creative effort. So thank you for your partnership. And Frank, I'll let you speak a little bit further.
Thank you, British.
Can you hear me now? Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you, British. And to the organizers, thank you very much for having us over. My name is Frank Aswani. I'm the CEO at AVPA. We're a Pan-African network of impact investors who are mobilizing capital towards social investments on the continent, and in essence, trying to help Africa close this SDG financing gap. We are, ironically, at the UN GA Week, and Africa is on course to meet only 2 of the 17 SDGs. Only 6 years away. And this is being done, is happening rather in the wake of declining aid, tight fiscal spaces, and a rising population. We're adding about 1 million people a month to the continent. We have less money for more Africans. We have to ask ourselves, how are we going to close the $2 million annual SDG financing gap? And the only way we can do that is to mobilize private capital. We're not going to achieve the SDGs without the help of the people in this room. The world of impact isn't short of money or short of risk capital. We only need 1% of what's available globally in the financial markets to close the SDGs. So how do we de-risk these social investments so we can get more of this kind of capital into the impact space? And what we're trying to do is to build this large amount of capital and enable private capital to come in, not in a manner that is meeting your mandates. We want you to make money resolve for human need. And this is what we're trying to do through this particular fund and initiative. So we're super excited to have the partnership here. And in particular, what we want to do is unlock the $1.8 trillion sitting in dormant capital on the continent. There's $1.8 trillion sitting in pension funds, insurance companies, dormant bank accounts. And in many ways, our capital should lead. We've leave the problem, we should leave the solution. So this particular initiative will look to unlock and de-risk social investments and primarily, first of all, crowding private capital into the impact space and domestic private capital for that matter, before we can even go seeking for international capital. So we're very delighted for the opportunity to work with SIF and Prosper Africa to get this initiative off the ground. We want to build a $20 million fund seeking about a 10x leverage of private capital. So initially we want to build about $2 billion, just as the beginning. Our aspiration is to go way beyond that. And this is an initiative where we're trying to play to the best of both worlds, combining the risk appetite for philanthropy with the scale of private capital in impact-linked innovative financing mechanisms. And we're demonstrating that it's possible to make money resolve for human need. So I'm really grateful to British and Prosper Africa and Faustina for trusting AVPA. We're headquartered in Nairobi with offices in Johannesburg and Lagos. We're Africa's leading impact network to try and do this. And what is really exciting about this as well for British and Faustina is we're not just solving for Africa. Whatever we prove to work in Africa is globally scalable because we offer extremes of conditions on the continent. That's so important for us. And this vehicle will test and proven innovative financing mechanisms and help them build a track record so they can be scaled and replicated, but where they're proven will help them scale to more countries, more places. So thank you very much for the support that you have, and it's good to be I noticed there are not many ladies on panels in this session, but this is really good to be here today with you folks. So thank you so much.
Thank you both, and if you don't mind, I will stand while I speak because I'm not so disciplined with those mics. My name is Faustina Finyame. I'm the Executive Director for SIF Africa. I'm based in Nairobi, and it was so wonderful when I walked in and I heard people speaking my local dialect tree. I felt so much at home, so thank you so much for that. At the Children Investment Fund Foundation, we deeply, deeply care about what is happening on our continent. And this week, if you've attended any meetings at all, you would have heard one narrative over and over again. The world is in a really challenging place. Africa is in a really challenging place. But at the same time, we see so much growth and opportunities on our beautiful continent. But it will take us to do things differently than we have done in the past, especially when it comes to development, health, climate change. We can't do the same thing and expecting different results. We're in a complete different space. And it's going to take real ways of financing those challenges. It's not going to come from development partners. And philanthropy, I would like to suggest to all of you, is the silent P in public-private partnership. There's philanthropy. Philanthropy in Africa. And believe you me, all of us in this room are philanthropists. If you're paying somebody's school fees, if you're paying for somebody's health bills, if you're paying for your auntie's this, you're a philanthropist. But we don't call it that way, and we don't pull it in the same way, and we don't talk about it in that way. But with this new exciting platform that we have created, this will allow us all to unlock the dormant, lazy capital that is sitting, whether it's in the global West or in Africa, and make it work for us. Let that money sweat for us to be able to develop our continent. What we need right now, we have talent on our continent. We know the solutions. The solutions have been talked about in this room today. What we need is financing. That's what is missing in all of the conversation. And how do we get that financing? And this is why we're setting up this platform. So please, I encourage all of you to be part of this. This is the solution. This is how we move forward. So thank you so much for your time. And British, Frank, thank you for being great collaborators and colleagues. And I look forward for us doing great things together and unlocking billions for our continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Faustina. Thank you so much, British, and thank you so much, Mr. Aswani. I promise you, my next moderator for the high-level panel discussion on shaping Africa's future, learning from experience, has a lot of joy. Let's welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Joy Kategewa. She's the Director, Regional Integration, Africa Development Bank. For the next panel discussion, please. Well, thank you very much, and good evening to you all. Indeed, I have a lot of joy to be here with you today. We're talking about shaping Africa's future with an eye on experience. We're talking about trade, we're talking about finance, we're talking about diaspora, we're talking about partnerships. All of this with an eye on infrastructure. We're trying to close the infrastructure gap. And so it's my honor and my privilege to invite such a distinguished set of panelists, starting off with Mrs. Marilo Akin-Olugbade, Vice President, Regional Development, Integration, and Business Delivery at the African Development Bank. She's also my boss. VP, please join us. We also have Mr. Jonathan Schmidt. I know you're in the audience. Please come out. Co-founder and CEO of Adtingo Limited. Then we have Mohammed Abdul Razak, Senior Vice President and Head of Capital Mobilization and Partnerships at the Africa Finance Corporation. And then we have Walid Hareb Al-Fahlahi, who's the CEO of the Dubai Consultancy. So as Walid comes to join us, we're going to try and dive right into the conversation because, as I said, we're really trying to crack this question around infrastructure. And so I'm going to come to you, Marilo, first and say, you know, some people call the AFDB the infrastructure bank. This is because of the track record of investment over the years in infrastructure. And I want you to tell us the learnings of what are we learning through the track record of the bank? I know that you talk about prepare, de-risk, finance, PDF. So what is this and how does it take us to the next level in financing infrastructure in Africa?
Thank you. Thank you very much to the organizers for this invitation to the bank, and thank you very much, Joy. Indeed, I think we at the African Development Bank believe that one of the critical contributions that the group can make to Africa's development is to help bridge this huge infrastructure deficit. I think the video said it was $130 billion, 170, probably more than 200 billion. Whichever figures one chooses, it is a huge figure. And what we have tried to do, and I will maybe just take the past 8 years, which also correspond to the term of President Adesina, the time that he has spent. We have invested over $50 billion in infrastructure financing, promoting regional integration, and also facilitating trade in Africa. And this includes investment in more than 25 transport corridors on the continent.
I think it's close to 19,000 kilometers of road, border post, bridges, but also electricity, more than 25 power interconnection. So this is a significant contribution. But since I think I see a lot of friends from Ghana, I would like to, of course, make a special zoom on one project that is very dear to my heart, and which is the Bokwase interchange in Ghana, which was the last projects that I had the pleasure of supervising with my team. And the financing was for $93 million. So the African Development Fund contributed $81 million. The government of Ghana $11 million, and to produce really a first class, the first four-tier interchange in West Africa and the second in sub-Saharan Africa. And this is the type of infrastructure that we're talking about. And a small mention again, even though if you join the only lady on the panel tonight, the team was an all-female team on the bank side. The project was finished within budget and on time, something that is also very rare on the continent. And of course, there's another project that is also dear to my heart, and this is what we want to do more of. It is those very complex cross-borders projects, and this is the standard gauge railway between Tanzania, Burundi, and DRC. And I think we heard earlier on about the Lobito corridor. These are some of these projects that we would like to be able to do now, to be able to unleash all the growth potential in a whole region, creating jobs, leveraging the value chain. And in this project, the African Development Bank was able to, by combining different instruments, grants, loans, guarantees, were able to provide 696 million contribution to the financing of this project. And we are also the initial mandated lead arranger to mobilize about 3.2 billion for these projects. These, I think, are some of the infrastructure projects of the future that are going to enable the Africa Free Continental Trade Area. I'll finish with the PDF. I first heard the expression from one of our African ministers, and indeed, it's a very nice way to summarize some of the lessons that we have. We can use to project ourselves. It is PDF, and it simply stands for prepare, de-risk, and finance project. The key issues that we have on the continent is the availability of investable projects. So we need to spend a lot of resources in preparation of projects. This is why the African Development Bank, in addition to financing projects, we like to set up institutions. How many of you know here that it is the African Development Bank, late President Babacar Ndiaye, who set up Afrexim Bank in 1994? This is a creation of the African Development Bank, just as the Africa 50, another institution set up to help prepare projects, to bring them to financial close, is also a creation of the African Development Bank. We de-risk project, and once we de-risk project and the project are well prepared, it's relatively easier to finance this project. There is ample capital.
Okay, interesting. Prepare, de-risk, finance. I'm coming to you, Abdul Razak. You have a smile on your face, Senior Vice President and Head of Capital Mobilization at AFC. AFC has developed a track record in navigating the complex space of building partnerships for infrastructure. So I want you to tell us what works. How do you go about it practically?
First of all, I just want to say thank you to the organizers for inviting me for this event. For those who don't know AFC is the Africa Finance Corporation, a leading multilateral finance institution which was formed in 2007 with one mandate. The mandate was to plug the infrastructure gap and provide pragmatic solutions for infrastructure projects on the continent. Since we were formed, we have invested in over 36 African countries. We have deployed over $13.3 billion. Those projects have added up to $40 billion of GDP to the African continent and created over 5 million jobs. How have we been able to do that? We've been able to do that predominantly through our unique business model. Our unique business model provides end-to-end services, starting from project development and financial advisory. Our co-panelists mentioned this. Developing of projects at the early stage for infrastructure is absolutely critical and the key to getting infrastructure projects done on the continent. As we all know, 90% of projects on the continent fall away in the development phase because you require a lot of financial, technical, and commercial expertise. So we spent a lot of time in developing our project development team. We also have a financial advisory team which also spends a lot of time with clients to de-risk and structure projects. Once you're able to de-risk and structure projects, you can put it to different investors, starting with AFC, but also crowding in other investors. So for every $1 of investment we put in, we're able to crowd in $4. And that's how we've been able to do it from our business model. Now, in terms of experience and live examples of where we've been able to do this, I'm going to use a sponsor project that cut across 3 key countries, Angola, DRC, and Zambia, which cuts across 4 critical infrastructure spaces, which is ports, rail, copper mining, and power, which cuts across 160 million people and 200 billion of GDP, and which obviously is starting from the Lobito corridor, which on the Zambia side is a greenfield project where we're selected as the lead developer by the US PGI and the EU to develop that project. In 1 year, since we were selected, we completed the feasibility study, we signed the concession agreement yesterday, and we got grant funding from the USTDA for an ESIA. We did that in 1 year. On the other side of the Lobito corridor that starts from the port of Lobito in Angola to the border of DRC, we served as financial advisors to the concessionaires, Trafigura and Motangio, in de-risking that project. Through the de-risking, we were able to raise $750 million, $550 from the DFC and $200 million from DBSA. We did that in 2 years. The last project, we funded the, I don't see there's 10 minutes left. We funded the critical mine in DRC, which is the Kamara Copper Company. And that project doesn't only include the mine, but it also includes a processing unit. And as we know, we've spoken about the fact that we need industrialization, we need beneficiation. Not only have we invested in copper processing unit, we also invested in a 178 megawatts hydro dam. So this just shows you these 3 projects cutting across 3 countries, greenfield, brownfield, and established, shows you how AFC has been able to operate and navigate the complexities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I very much like the idea of the integrated approach behind Lobito holds a promise for development. So, Jonathan Schmidt, I'm coming to you. I'm talking about agriculture because Atengo is big on agro-productivity. And I'd like for you to share with us in 2-3 minutes, how you strike the right investments for agriculture in Africa.
I'll do my best to be as disciplined as possible about the time. We do design, invest, develop, execute, and operate infrastructure projects. We're actually partnered with Africa Development Bank in several projects, and I do applaud all the work you've helped with. We also operate in Asia and South Asia, and so that gives us a perspective particularly about Africa. For Africa, we need to provide a little bit of context. Agriculture, food and agriculture is not the game that it used to be for the past century. We're at a tipping point, and it's a poly-crisis. Africa is part of that crisis, but it's a global crisis. And so it demands fresh thinking and seeking new designs about how we're going to mitigate that crisis. What kind of crisis am I talking about? Well, up until the past half century, it's been about clearing land, cultivating more, and then trying to increase your productivity. We already have 30% of all land dedicated to agriculture globally. We have 70% of all available water in agriculture. We have 8 billion people, and in 2050, we're going to have 10 billion people. We can't play the same game. The second bit, which is also part of the problem, but the opportunity, is the enormity of waste in African, but also in global food chains. We waste 30% of all harvested food before it reaches the human consumer. 30%. That's the global average. For many food types in Africa, that number's north of 40. So we have the ability, if we can capture that food and bring it back into the human value chain, we can increase the productivity that we have and the impact that we're having. We have clients now in North Africa, they're in their second year of 30% plus food inflation on year. It's politically destabilizing. Ghana has seen their cocoa crops, because of climate change, go down from 1 million tons per year to under 600,000 tons per year. The climate change is the big factor that is combining with population, the remnants of COVID, political disruption in supply chains. All of these are creating a superstorm. Final comment. It's not all dark and scary. So there are technologies, there are capabilities, but it does take a combination of these type of PPP frameworks, and we need the governments to be having the will to undertake these complex guarantees that they need to do, and if they do, they will unlock the private sector capability and capital to address these kind of solutions. Once you bring stability to what you eat, what you grow, then you can do the other productivity investments of upstream cultivation and downstream productivity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Walid, I had so many questions in my mind to ask you, but we're pressed for time. So I'm just going to take you to the region you come from and how it literally shaped its future by design. Coming from that perspective and knowing, I read your bio, it says you're a strong believer in the world being a small place. So I'd like for you to share experiences from the region you come from and how it can inform what Africa wants to do in terms of filling its infrastructure gap.
I think probably, first of all, thank you very much for the organizers for inviting me. Also, very honored to be part of a very interesting panel. I think probably the pivotal purpose that we go on low profile, and my brother was with us yesterday. We announced actually something very interesting called UAE Africa Economic Corridor. For some of you know or not, UAE is probably in the top 3 investors in Africa. And in certain areas we are investors even bigger than the big boys by miles. But the leadership that we have, they don't believe in creating business and all this. We focus on getting the job done. Africa is not a country where all continent we only invest. It's our people, we share common areas with Africa. So what we did is most of our investment was based on infrastructure, ports. I mean, literally in Africa, we have about 18, 20 ports that between DP World and Abu Dhabi ports. We have into agriculture, etc. But now what we did, we actually taken the whole streamline. Most of investment coming to Africa is focused on infrastructure. But yes, it's not, you have e-commerce, you have trade finance, SME development. So what we did is we didn't only focus on infrastructure. We have certain companies that are professional, that even more professional than me, that I cannot talk on their behalf. But what we focus in developing infrastructure. And what we did, part of this corridor that we launched, we divided this corridor into 2. UAE side, Africa side. And what we did, we briefed every ministry, every company. Don't come to us talking about the billions. Every time I sit in these conferences, I hear the billions, we're going to invest 100 billion. No. We said one project at a time. This gentleman here, we asked the CEO for one project. Don't talk to us about, and also don't come and ask us for money. Come up, bring a project, we'll study it, we'll invest. But, so what we did, we allocated all of our partners' projects, and in the Africa side, for example, taking to consider Badia, we sat with Badia and said, listen, there is a common ground for us to work on specific project. They will put, we'll put, this is how we go about things in our part of the world.
Very interesting, and I'm so glad that is how I asked the question, because I see how to knit the thread. I've been told it's 5 minutes, so I'm going to come back to everybody, and I'm going to talk about hope. We have to live with hope. So I'll start with you, Mary-Laure, and say, you know, look a little bit ahead and give us a hopeful future of infrastructure finance. And then I'll come to you and say why you're hopeful, why you're hopeful, why you're hopeful. Then we'll close there. A minute each, please.
Thank you very much, Joy. And I'm very hopeful for the continent. I believe that infrastructure finance will be more African. It will be more private sector led. It will be more green, and it will be also very climate resilient. Why do I say that? And it has been said before. Something that people do not sufficiently realize is that African governments are already financing a lot of that infrastructure, about 40% thereabout. Another 40% by GFIs, some of us are here, and it's only 20% that is financed by the private sector. So with pension funds, sovereign wealth fund, insurance companies sitting on $2.5 trillion, infrastructure finance must become African. It will be green, it will be private sector led, and what some of us will continue to do is to indeed continue to ensure that it is with the risk. We provide those instruments. We provide also structuring so that we can have local currency financing to de-risk again some of this investment, and we co-create platforms to be able to bring some of these investment to the continent. So I'm extremely hopeful, and I know that the Africa we want is an Africa that is interconnected, that is going to start using all these regional infrastructure corridors that we are financing. We will use innovative financial instruments, and we will unleash amazing economic opportunities and develop competitive national and regional value chains. So I'm very optimistic.
Thank you. Thank you very much, VP Mary-Laure. Jonathan?
I'm trying to keep it brief, but I'm just going to pick up on this idea of interconnectivity and what we're seeing. So from Friday, I'll fly to Uganda. And then from Uganda, we're working on a project that involves Uganda, Burundi, Kenya, about leveraging a food corridor that's coming in through Mombasa. And it's going to involve Dutch financing to develop the port corridor. So we are already seeing the kind of coordination that needs to happen to have transformative agriculture, because it's about scale. And I think people are starting to get that, and they're starting to be able to put together the complexity that needs to happen to realize those projects.
Excellent. Yes, please.
I'm hopeful because of trust. There's increasing trust in the ability to get things done, and there's increasing confidence about getting things done by people within and outside the continent. And I think the understanding that Africa is funding Africa, the fact that people don't realize that if you continue to be consistent, you attract that private sector capital and public sector capital to get things done. So I'm hopeful because of trust.
Trust, yes. What about you, Walid? Why are you hopeful?
I'm just going to follow his comment. I think Africa always should be hopeful because of youth, because of population. But I think there's few things that it's simpler. Fixing Africa is not as difficult as people think. I'll give you an example. I have to tease a little bit my brothers here. You know, when we go and we advise our company to invest, you know what they tell us? Can you show us an investment map? So So this is the same philosophy I used. I asked you guys, can you show us your investment map? What does investment map mean? The projects, the location, the visibility study, and what is the potential? Why this is important? Because any overseas investor or local investor is looking for any international or local. They want to know, I will not name the country. We went there to invest in 100 megawatts solar. The government gave us a location of land. Even animals cannot live there. The land is impossible to have anything there. Why? Because they're directed by someone. So we need that level of professionalism. Believe me, there is no better place. I'm telling you, even in the Middle East, it's not as good as Africa.
A good place to stop the conversation and to wrap up really in a second or two by saying we have the script going forward. Prepare, de-risk, finance. The next part of the script is partnerships, not just PPPs, but all of the stakeholders involved. The third piece is an integrated approach is critical. We're not doing the infrastructure of extraction. We're doing the infrastructure of integration and economic prosperity. The fourth piece is technology. Technology can help us to go further. And then the final one is hope. Hope. It's possible because Africa has owned it. African governments are investing most in it. And there are partnerships that are coming on board, so we will get there. Thank you very much.
A quick group picture, please, for the next part, the panel. We have one more panel, and we will be stepping out of here after our remarks from Nanajwa and also from Kofi Apente. Let me quickly as I can, welcome Jennifer Zabazaja, Bloomberg Television's Chief Africa Correspondent and Anchor, to lead us in the next panel. She would assemble her panel and the conversations will begin. Miss Jennifer, please put your hands together for Miss Jennifer. Thank you very much for coming.
Great. Oh, wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me. So let's get this panel started. I mean, you've spent a day hearing, probably the whole week, hearing about a lot of the initiatives and investments. And this is important for us to talk more about connecting skills, technology, and financial investments of global Africans to support Africa's infrastructure. So let me welcome to the stage our panelists, Ms. Denise Laurent-Mante, Executive Director of the President's Council on Africa Diaspora Engagement. Hello. Kendra Gaither. She is the President of the U.S. Africa Business Center. And finally, Dr. Olivia Kamanzi, President of the Africa Global Chamber of Commerce. Oh, you know what? Oh, Dr. Olivia, do you have a mic as well? There we go. Wonderful. Okay, maybe it's best to start. Every UNGA and global summits and forums, I notice there's a number of investments and commitments that are made. I wonder, based on what the three of you have been experiencing this week, I mean, what gives you hope that we're actually getting closer to bridging the gap between the African diaspora and the continent? Start for us.
Maybe I'll start. So let me to start off with a bit about the President's Council on African Diaspora Engagement. In 2022, President Biden hosted African heads of state in Washington, D.C. for a summit. And with many summits, we often think about deliverables and announcements and what to really announce to make that summit really stand out. And one of the things that we wanted to really put together was finding a unique way for us to widen or diversify our stakeholder engagement with Africa. And so we came up with this African Diaspora Engagement Council in the sense of our African diaspora is a source of strength, right, for the United States. We have this very unique history. We're seeing this, awakening, if I would say, with the diaspora truly going back to the continent, connecting historically, and also connecting economically. And so the diaspora is investing on the continent. They're looking to really connect with their historical roots. And so this council is really a council where we advise the president on how can we engage the African diaspora when it comes to providing recommendations for investing in Africa, our U.S. Africa foreign policy. And so I think it's a very unique way in us widening our partnerships, right? Using the diaspora as a source of strength when it comes to where can we invest, right? I think we see the many opportunities on the continent, right? And I think that the diaspora should be at the forefront of that, whether it's investing in real estate or, expanding your business. And so I think looking at the diaspora is a key way to do that. And for us, that gives us hope, right? In the sense that we have a diaspora that's tapped into that network to really encourage further economic growth on the continent.
Kendra, I saw you nodding there. Do you agree?
Absolutely. So I'm at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I'm privileged to serve as president of our U.S. Africa Business Center, which is the Chamber's division for increasing trade and investment between the nations of Africa and the United States. And 2 years ago, the Chamber started, after some years of study and research, we established an initiative called Advance with Africa. And the premise behind that initiative is very akin to what the President's Advisory Council is doing. In fact, I've had the privilege of partnering with Denise in a variety of ways, but also specifically within working with the Diaspora Council. We are focused on going out beyond Washington, D.C., where we're located, to talk to diverse business leaders across the United States about the opportunity to connect with partners and opportunity and explore ways to be better connected with the continent in terms of growing trade and investment linkages. I mean, what we have found is that the energy is off the charts. Every time we have engaged an event, which is focused specifically on small and medium enterprises, and particularly those business leaders of the African diaspora, that it's standing room only, be it in Atlanta and Houston and Washington, D.C., online, wherever we have taken this outside of the Beltway, if you will, and even our virtual engagements, we've had robust energy and engagement and considerable feedback from companies who are looking for how to get started, how to be better positioned to leverage the tools that are available. I love that the panel before talked about PDF and how to de-risk as one of those mantras or steps as part of the process. There are tools available offered by the private sector, but also the public sector to help companies who are entering an African market for the first time or scaling from one to the next. And we've seen that energy and that enthusiasm, that hunger for information, so that those who are of the diaspora who have an interest have tools to be able to leverage and to contribute to the continent's continued growth.
Dr. Olivia, give us your perspective, especially since the Africa Global Chamber of Commerce has been was created.
Thank you so much. First of all, I have to thank for the organizers, APN, and the African American Institute for having us this afternoon. This initiative is really welcome, especially I see here, Denise, all the work you're doing mobilizing diaspora, me myself being one of diaspora. So I'm really so excited as a founder and the chairman of Africa Global Chamber of Commerce. After spending a couple of years in Rwanda, I was born in Rwanda and then left Rwanda when I was a teenager, moved to Switzerland to America, working in investment banking for 25 years, JP Morgan Chase and Citigroup. When I was called by the president of Rwanda to go back as a diaspora to set up the capital market of Rwanda, set up Rwanda Stock Exchange. It really gave me perspective after spending many years here to go back to contribute. So the key I've experienced was the skills we need. We need the diaspora that goes back with some skills, then contribute back home. That's why I went back home. Then being able to set up the Rwanda capital market has helped to make where Rwanda is today. First thing we have been able to achieve was, if you look at Rwanda aviation industry, when I arrived in Rwanda, we had only one airplane. Today we have more than 13 aircrafts flying all over Africa and even beyond Africa. We have a Kigali Convention Center, which hosts all global conferences in Rwanda. That was because of the capital market we had helped to set up for Rwanda. After that, I returned back to US because I was kind of exhausted. I said, after 3 years, so when you work with the president of Rwanda, Kagame, you have to work hard. After 3 years, I said, let me take a break, go back to US, run my own private business. When I came back, I set up my investment bank based in Chicago. We have an asset management. We manage more than $3 billion US. It's small. This is not my money. It's the money for my clients. Also, once I set up this company, I felt like something is missing. Alone, you can be successful, but together can go far. That's how the idea for Africa Global Chamber of Commerce was established. We mobilized, especially connecting our brothers and sisters, African American. We said, let's bring us together as people in diaspora, do something. We created a platform, Africa Global Chamber of Commerce, to bring us together to address those issues. We're talking about infrastructure deficit, healthcare is issue, education, so on and so forth, agriculture for Africa, especially with the focus on the youth and the women. I'm even excited to be on this podium for women. Even our chamber, 70% on our board are women, to see how we really value women and the young people. So I believe with all the knowledge we can mobilize in diaspora, we go back, that keep the knowledge, the skills we need for Africa. In addition, most of us, we have worked for corporate America, we have worked for financial institutions, we have access to many managers. As we're speaking right now, I just came from South Africa. We took a group, a trade mission of investors to meet with private equities, money managers, fund managers in South Africa after we met in Atlanta to see how we can cross the gap. What we are talking about, 150 billion annual deficit in infrastructure. That's how we can do it. In diaspora, we can do it. African must build Africa, and we have all we need to build Africa we want. If Africa can move forward, we can address this deficit we have in the infrastructure. If we diaspora will step up, we contribute.
Step up. So then where are the gaps then? I mean, is it about de-risking? Is that really what is holding back any sort of additional momentum or channeling of investments?
So I think de-risking has been an issue for several years now, and I think it's still an issue, and there are several resources and avenues to help de-risk. I think investing on the continent, people are just risk averse in general. But looking at the diaspora in particular, right, because they already have strong ties to the continent, if you are able to mobilize the diaspora, it makes it easier for them to invest because of those close ties, right? And so I think that's one of the reasons why it's important to mobilize the diaspora to be at the forefront of the investment train because of those close connections that actually makes it quite easier. But the work that Kendra and her team is doing helps to provide a network of people who are interested, but also provide the resources that I think can support some of those investments. Similar to U.S. government, we heard from British Robinson from Prosper Africa. Prosper Africa does a great job providing resources for companies. For example, if there is a Black-owned restaurant in Atlanta and they want to expand their business to Accra or to Kigali, we can provide resources to help do that.
And I'm glad you mentioned those cities because I find it interesting that a lot of the same cities and countries get most of the investment, right, on the continent. I mean, how do we get away from that and expand that out a bit more?
Well, I'll chime in because I think the answer is the diaspora. In our U.S. Africa Business Center, we have a number of diaspora business leaders who are really visionary in how they're connecting to the continent. They are operating in markets where they have a connection, which is a key statistic that we've learned in our work. And when you look at how U.S. companies, and that's my experience, I know, and with reference to the fact that my panelist is looking at global Africa, my experience is looking at the U.S. experience. And so when you have nearly 15% of the United States population pointing to or having some connection to descendant of the continent, and you have leaders who have a personal connection to a country, they are undaunted by what would be perceived to be the challenges because there's a purpose or mission-driven angle to their work. And I'll just call out one leader in particular that we've worked with that has been working across West and Central Africa to help connect the nations digitally, building out AI and data and cyber networks. And as there have been less than democratic transitions in some of those nations, the focus has been on the people, and he has continued to bring resources to ensure that the citizens of those countries continue to have the opportunity to thrive. And it's a unique story where he's bringing other companies along, and that's enabling populations to continue to grow and thrive. And those aren't, necessarily the South Africas, the Kenyas, the Nigerias that often become the focus, but it's where you have those ties. And just to close that point out, 96% of the world's population is outside of the United States. When we think about how U.S. companies export or seek partners outside of the U.S., when they're exporting to really 4 or 5 markets. It's Canada and Mexico because they're neighbors, and there's comfort there. It's the UK and Japan. And so if you have 98% of small businesses exporting only to one market or seeking partners in only one market, and it's those 5, then it's been driven by traditional ties where you have a family or personal connection or know the market. And so in many ways, the diasporas are a superpower in being able to disrupt those patterns and ensure that if a company can get to Japan, they can certainly get, to Ghana, or they can get to Mauritania or Mali or Angola or wherever it may be. And so we have a roadmap through the diaspora on how to do that.
Are there any specific sectors that you're focused on in particular?
So our work is really driven by where our members are active, and so digital is a big one, partnering in the digital transformation of the continent, but agriculture is one, health in particular, a general trade and investment, exports of goods. All of those are traditional ones, but we see continued growth in the creative sectors as well, and knowing that can be a leading edge also of addressing some of those perception issues that may be limiting more investment in the continent.
Thank you so much for that. Dr. Olivia, I want you to dig into, not that it's an either and or, but the diaspora here in the U.S. versus a lot of the rest of the world. I mean, what are you seeing in terms of engagement and how it's different, if it is different at all?
Very different. If you look the historical background, United States or North America and South America, we have more diaspora, more than any other continent, right? The U.S. we're talking around the 15 million. African American, when you go to Brazil, more than maybe 100 million, if I'm not mistaken. So those are big numbers. So therefore, Africa can benefit a lot. I think Africa has a lot of opportunities to tap into this diaspora we have. We're talking about investable assets. In terms of investable assets of African American is close to 1.3 trillion US dollars. If we can just tap into those investable assets and be able to deploy them to Africa, is amazing. I can give you one specific example. We noticed that America is not investing in Africa as we wished to be. There is no such big project you can say this project is being done by US investors or US government. We noticed if we are going to wait, we're going to wait forever. Otherwise, China is coming, Turkey is coming, India is coming, and then US is a bit lagging behind them. I'm sorry to say this for the US Chamber of Commerce. Now we come up with this initiative, what we call Africa Diaspora Investment Series, which will take across the continent of Africa, driven by and led by African diaspora. We launched the first one in Atlanta in last August, 28th through 31st. And then the first focus we said, let's focus on one specific country. We thought because these connections, relationships, background, historical background between US and South Africa, we said let's start by South Africa. We brought fund managers from South Africa. We brought business from South Africa. We brought investment banks, money managers, all people in finance to meet in Atlanta to start thinking, discussing about investing in Africa. Now we start really, the first thing we focus on, let's start by 15 billion as a threshold. That's a minimum, and see how far we can go. Once we finish that conference, we have a couple of deals in pipeline right now are being discussed for matter of disclosure or whatever. I cannot disclose how much money is being discussed, but when we meet next year, I will tell you how much was closed. But some MOUs were signed, but the deals have been closed, but the amount we still have to disclose very, very soon. Now we had a follow-up. Trade mission to South Africa. We were in Johannesburg and in Cape Town. We took a group of 15 African diaspora investors to South Africa. We intend to duplicate, even do more. It's just first initiative. That's a kind of initiative we need to duplicate across US, across the continent. So next time maybe we can take another country. So we really think we diaspora, we need to take leadership and lead on these issues we are discussing right now.
And maybe, and maybe just to wrap up, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty, right, in a number of governments globally, right? US, across the African continent, in the UK. I mean, how does the diaspora ensure continuity no matter who is in public office? I mean, I wonder if there's any bit of what you all are thinking in terms of ensuring that there's no stoppage or setback, no matter who's in office.
So from a government perspective, I think regardless of whoever is in office, one of the ways that we are continuing to do our work is that the council is institutionalized within the Department of State. And so, you know, despite whoever's in office come November or January or so, the work continues as though, you know, our U.S. Africa foreign policy continues. But I think, you know, mobilizing the diaspora is an ongoing effort that doesn't really require someone being in office, right? I think that the key thing is partnership and continuing to, you know, sort of diversify our partners, whether it's working with Chamber of Commerce, working with, you know, AAI, who does great work by mobilizing the diaspora. I think we have to continue to mobilize different partners and diversify our partnerships.
I think that message is very consistently the same. And I would point to consistency as being the key. At the Chamber, we don't get involved in presidential politics in any country around the world because whomever is elected, whomever is in charge, there's a commitment to work with them to achieve the aims of business. If you're an investor, it's not a one-year thing. It's a 3 to 5 year window to think about a project, to line up financing partners, and you're investing for 20, 30 years. That's the continuity in relationships. It's that you've made a commitment that's long-term to a market where you're operating. And so we serve as a continuity and work with whomever is in office to ensure that those relationships continue to thrive.
Dr. Olivier, do you want to close this out? You do. That wasn't a question. I think you're going to.
What I have to say, we're discussing about technology, we're discussing the skills, we're discussing finance, investments, the closing the gap. The key thing is we need to come together. we should not work in the silos. If we, all of us, with all the fields where you are, whether you are in technology, when you healthcare, when in education, you have something to contribute. Especially all those things we are talking about is all about infrastructure, development. So infrastructure is in education, in healthcare, everything we can touch is cross-cutting. To address this infrastructure deficit, we need what we have seen. When you look at here in New York, you have more Ghanaian doctors than in Ghana, right? So if you can mobilize Ghanaian doctors here in New York, just to go to Ghana, you don't have to go back, but do something in Ghana, right? I'll give you an example. When you talk about how many doctors in Houston, Nigerians, if we can talk to those Nigerian doctors in Houston to go to Nigeria, we can address all those gaps we are experiencing right now. Lastly, we think everything is in us. We have what it takes to solve African problems, to address the infrastructure deficit. When we have to trust in ourselves, what we need is two things. One is the mindset. We change our mindset. The second is stop complaining, just do it. Thank you.
That's a good message to end on. Thank you all for listening, and thank you.
Events and forum like this, and when we go out, we tend to sometimes forget some of the things that were said, and to put it all together for us so that to save you from all the embarrassment. Ladies and gentlemen, please, let's welcome the Executive Director for the Africa Prosperity Network, Nana Adjoa Hackman, for the key takeaways and call to action.
Thank you, Refa. Excellencies, distinguished special guests, our partners. I see Africa America Institute, Mr. Kofi Penting. I see Badia still in the room with us. I see Buena Vista Homes, AFDB, all our sponsors. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening to you. The concept note for this year's edition of the Global Africa Forum promised that the outcome of these discussions will be for stakeholders to proffer bold remedies to the canker of infrastructure deficits and map out investment and fund sourcing strategies to scale up and propel shared prosperity for Africa and Africans alike. Having witnessed today's remarks and discussions and listen to the various remarks that were delivered earlier, I would say that we have achieved just that. And even more, we've heard about so many projects that are underway and projects in the pipeline. It means that we are already on course to bridging that gap, and we will not rest until we have done so. Therefore, it is my great pleasure and a real honor to deliver to you in as crisp a format as I can the key takeaways from tonight's discussions. And of course, in the coming days, we'll be sharing with you the comprehensive outcome document from everything that was discussed today, so you don't have to remember everything. In all, there have been 4 clear themes that have emerged from the remarks and discussions this evening. Theme 1, connect the skills, technology, and capital of global Africans to the development of key sectors on the continent. In all our panel discussions, we've heard about enhancing collaboration between Africa and its diaspora to leverage specialized skills in sectors like healthcare, education, and digital technology. 2, we've also heard about increasing facilitation of technology transfer from the diaspora to support Africa's development in key industries. Mobilize diaspora investment into critical infrastructure projects across energy, housing, transportation, and health. We have resolved here to structure programs for knowledge sharing and capacity building, integrating diaspora expertise with local talent to strengthen key sectors. Theme 2, we have resolved to encourage global investments, especially global African investors, to capitalize on Africa's single market size of 1.4 billion. And we're told this is growing too. Under this theme, the following were resolved. Boost foreign direct investment from global African investors drawn by Africa's expanding single market and its opportunities. B, create streamlined pathways for the diaspora to invest in African startups and enterprises, reducing barriers to entry. C, accelerate strategic investments in high potential sectors like renewable energy, fintech, and agribusiness to maximize the benefits of Africa's single market. Improve investor confidence in Africa's markets through policy alignment, tax incentives, and stable economic frameworks. Theme 3 was clearly making public-private partnerships for infrastructure projects more attractive for investors. And under this theme, we have resolved to do the following: develop more favorable policies and tax incentives to encourage public-private partnerships infrastructure. B, create risk-sharing mechanisms to make infrastructure investments more secure and appealing to private investors. Promote cross-border infrastructure projects to facilitate regional integration and connect African markets. And finally, use innovative financing solutions, including blended finance, to scale up PPPs for large-scale infrastructure projects. Theme 4, ladies and gentlemen, advancing with economic powers like the USA, and there was a lot about that on the final panel, to ensure policy frameworks reflects on the need of Africa's large-scale infrastructure development and integration. Under this theme, the following are resolved: to increase cooperation with global economic powers, example, the USA and EU, to align policies with Africa's long-term infrastructure goals, strengthen partnerships between African nations and global financial institutions to secure funding for large-scale projects, facilitate trade agreements and policy frameworks that enhance Africa's infrastructure and connectivity on a global scale, enhance advocacy for African infrastructure needs at international forums, ensuring Africa's developmental priorities are represented globally. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I dare say, and I believe that I speak for my chairman, Mr. Gabi Asare Ochre-Daku, and the entire APN team, as well as the Africa American Institute, that at the end of today's series of discussions, our work in relation to APD 2025 has been well cut out for us. The outcome of today will dovetail into the program to be held in Accra in January, and I know that given our combined teams and our track record, we will not rest until we have an integrated market that allows for free movement of people, goods, and services in a borderless Africa of countless economic opportunities. We thank you all exceedingly for your contribution to today's outcome. We heard it said just now that alone you can be successful, but together we can fly. We are truly grateful for your partnership, And on that note, permit me to end by re-echoing our chairman's invitation at the beginning of the session for you all to make a date with us in Accra in January 2025, the 30th of January to the 1st of February 2025 for the Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you so much, Nanajwa Hackman. She's our Executive Director for the Africa Prosperity Network. And standing on that, I'd also want to say a big thank you to our sponsors, Golden Coast Developers, Def Traco, Buena Vista Homes, JO Properties, Delta Airlines. We also have our institutional and knowledge partners. We have the UNDP, we have the United Nations, we have the Afri-Exim Bank, we also have Badea, we have the Africa Business Council, we have the AFDB, Soft Africa, Africa Soft Power, we have the Oxford Business Group, the Africa America Institute, the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, Africa Legal Associates, 3-Year Africa Summit, Chartered Institute Realtors, and the Chamber of Real Estate, and many more, and you as well. And we'll give you more of our sponsors. But before we go, of course, we started with the Africa Prosperity Network with a welcome address, and this would not have been possible without this great partnership with the Africa America Institute. I'd like to invite the president of AAI, Mr. Kofi Appington, for the closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, please, let's welcome him.
Madam Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and valued partners, as we conclude this important event on mobilizing global African investment for Africa's infrastructure needs, I thank you for engaging in thoughtful dialogue about policy and pathways to meeting Africa's infrastructure needs and our shared future. Whether in transportation, energy, or digital connectivity, the infrastructure we build today lays the groundwork for a sustainable tomorrow and builds our influence on the global stage. Today, we've discussed powerful examples of successful investments and policies that not only transform economies, but also unlock this opportunity. As we advocate for increased investment, we must emphasize the importance of economic sovereignty, an idea that we at the Africa America Institute consider foundational to the next phase of African growth. Each nation and region must have the agency to define its own development pathways, ensuring that investments align with needs and priorities. This means fostering an environment where both local and global investors feel confident to commit their resources, while also ensuring that these investments contribute to self-sustaining economies. That's because infrastructure is about more than just roads, bridges, and internet cable. It's about a shared vision that can only be developed by fostering relationships, sharing knowledge, and building networks, not just between governments and investors, but among ourselves as African nations, as entrepreneurs, and as a global Africa. By fostering collaboration, we can strengthen our collective voice and enhance our bargaining power in global investments. Economic sovereignty is about unity. When we can connect with each other, we create a powerful network that can advocate for fair terms and drive investments that genuinely serve our people. Infrastructure development cannot just be about individual projects. It must be about our shared future. By investing wisely, integrating our efforts, and connecting people and ideas, we can meet Africa's infrastructural needs while deepening our shared sense of economic sovereignty. Together, we can pave the way for a brighter, more connected future for Africa, one where the continent and global Africa not only thrive, but lead in shaping our destiny. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Penting. I must also say that apart from the Africa America Institute, this has been powered by the Africa Intercontinental Free Trade Area, AFTA, and of course the Pan-African Payment Settlement Systems, PAPS, and of course our kind sponsors, and I've gone through them.
So on behalf of the Executive Chairman of Africa Prosperity Network, on behalf of the Board of Directors and the Advisory Council, we want to register our sincere appreciation to everyone who participated in today's event. This will be the way we end the event. And to tell you that we ended right on the time we set out to end, 7 p.m. Thank you very much.
And of course, Gina is